What happens when a royal guest completely loses control on live television? When the cameras are rolling and millions are watching, and someone who's supposed to represent dignity and grace instead chooses to unleash a torrent of disrespect toward one of America's most beloved morning show hosts. In just 35 seconds, a single comment would shatter the illusion, expose an entitled attitude, and lead to one of the most shocking exits in morning television history. Good Morning America's studio was buzzing with its usual energy. The lights were hot, the crew was ready, and viewers across the country were settling in with their coffee for what they thought would be a typical morning interview. Sam Champion, the weatherman who had become a household name, was preparing to sit down with Prince Harry for what was scheduled to be a light, 15-minute conversation about charity work and upcoming projects. Le Sam Champion greeted the prince with his signature warmth. His smile was genuine, his handshake firm. This was what Sam did best, making guests feel comfortable while keeping the conversation flowing for the viewers at home. He had interviewed presidents, celebrities, and royalty before. This should have been easy. "Welcome to Good Morning America," Sam said, gesturing toward the guest chair. "We're so glad to have you here." Prince Harry sat down, but something was already off. His posture was stiff, his expression was cold. There was no warmth in his eyes, no appreciation for the platform he was being given. He barely acknowledged Sam's greeting. Sam, ever the professional, pressed forward. "So, let's talk about your new initiative. You've been working on some really exciting projects lately. Tell our viewers what's been keeping you busy." The prince shifted in his seat. "Well, I suppose that's what we're here to discuss, isn't it?" His tone was dismissive, now almost annoyed that Sam had asked such a basic opening question. Sam's smile didn't waver, but anyone watching closely could see the slight confusion in his eyes. He nodded encouragingly, waiting for the prince to actually answer the question. But instead of diving into the charity work, the prince leaned back and sighed. "I'm working on things that actually matter," the prince finally said. "Things that make a real difference in the world, unlike, well, in some of the content that gets pushed on morning television." The studio went quiet. Producers behind the cameras exchanged glances. Sam's smile tightened, just a fraction, but he maintained his composure. He was too seasoned to let a subtle jab throw him off his game. "Well, we certainly appreciate all types of meaningful work," Sam said smoothly. "And I know our viewers are curious to hear more specifics about what you're doing. Can you walk us through your latest project?" Prince Harry looked directly at the camera, bypassing Sam entirely. "I think what people need to understand is that real change doesn't come from sitting in a comfortable studio talking about the weather and celebrity gossip. It comes from action." The insult was clear. Sam Champion had built his career on more than just weather reports. He had covered natural disasters, helped communities prepare for emergencies, raised awareness for countless causes, and done it all with grace and humility. And here was a guest on his show dismissing all of that work as meaningless. Sam took a breath. His professionalism was being tested, but he wasn't going to take the bait. Not yet. "I think our viewers would agree that there are many ways to make a difference," he said calmly, "including using media platforms to spread important messages, which is, of course, why you're here today." The prince's jaw tightened. He clearly didn't appreciate being reminded that he had come onto the very platform he was now criticizing. "I'm here because I was told this would be a serious conversation, not the usual fluff piece you people do." "You people?" Those two words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. The crew members looked at each other with wide eyes. The producers were now frantically whispering into their headsets. Sam Champion, however, remained perfectly still. "I can assure you," Sam said, and his voice still steady, "that we take every interview seriously. We've prepared thoughtful questions about your work. If you'd like to answer them, we can continue. But I do need to ask that we maintain a level of mutual respect." Prince Harry let out a short, bitter laugh. Mutual respect? From someone who reads cue cards for a living? The entire studio seemed to freeze. This wasn't just rude anymore. This was a direct, personal attack on a man who had dedicated decades to his craft, so who had earned the admiration of colleagues and viewers alike, who had always treated every guest with dignity, regardless of who they were. Sam Champion's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. He had reached his limit. "I'm going to stop you right there," Sam said, his voice firm but controlled. "I've been doing this job for a very long time. I've interviewed thousands of people, and I've always believed that everyone deserves respect, no matter their background or their title. I've extended that courtesy to you today." The prince opened his mouth to respond, but Sam held up a hand. He wasn't finished. "You came on this show as a guest," Sam continued. "Nobody forced you to be here. You wanted this platform to share your message. And that's fine. We were happy to have you. But what you don't get to do is sit in that chair and insult me, insult this show, and insult the incredible team of people who work here every single day to bring quality content to millions of Americans." Prince Harry's face was flushed now. He clearly hadn't expected to be challenged. "Excuse me? Do you know who you're talking to?" Sam nodded slowly. "I do. You're a guest on Good Morning America, and right now, you're being disrespectful." The prince stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I don't have to sit here and be lectured by you." "You're absolutely right," Sam said, standing as well. "You don't. In fact, I think it would be best if you didn't." The prince stared at him in disbelief. Are you kicking me off the show?" Sam's voice was calm, measured, and absolutely final. "Yes, I am." The studio erupted into chaos. Producers were rushing onto the set. Camera operators didn't know where to point their lenses. The prince was sputtering, ear trying to find words that wouldn't come. He looked around as if expecting someone to intervene on his behalf, to tell Sam Champion that he couldn't possibly be serious. But Sam wasn't backing down. He stood there, arms crossed, waiting for the prince to leave. There was no anger in his face, just a quiet strength. He had drawn a line, and he wasn't going to let anyone cross it, not even royalty. "This is absurd," Prince Harry said, his voice rising. "You can't treat me like this." "I just did," Sam replied simply. The prince looked at the producers, at the crew, searching for an ally. But everyone in that studio had heard what he'd said. They'd heard him insult their colleague, their friend. Nobody was coming to his rescue. "Do you have any idea what kind of backlash you're going to face?" the prince demanded, his voice shaking with indignation. I could make things very difficult for you." Sam's expression didn't change. "Sock, is that a threat?" The prince's mouth opened and closed. He realized, too late, how badly he'd miscalculated. He'd thought his status would protect him, that he could say whatever he wanted and face no consequences. But Sam Champion had just proven him wrong. "I think you should leave now," Sam said quietly, "before this gets any worse." For a moment, it looked like the prince might argue further. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides. His breathing was heavy. But then one of the producers stepped forward and gestured toward the exit. The message was clear. This interview was over. Prince Harry turned on his heel and stormed off the set. His footsteps echoed through the studio as he disappeared through the doors. The moment he was gone, the tension broke like a wave crashing on shore. Sam Champion stood there for a moment, taking a deep breath. Then he looked at the camera, at the millions of viewers who had just witnessed the entire exchange. "Well," he said with a slight smile, his composure returning, "I apologize to everyone watching at home. That's not how we typically conduct interviews here at Good Morning America. We believe in respectful dialogue, and when that's not possible, well, you saw what happens." The crew around him started to applaud. It began slowly, just a few people clapping, but within seconds, the entire studio was filled with the sound of hands coming together. They were applauding Sam for standing his ground, for defending not just himself, but all of them. Sam raised a hand, asking for quiet. "Let's move on," he said professionally. "We've got a great show lined up for you today." But what had just happened couldn't simply be moved on from. The clip would be replayed endlessly. People would dissect every word, every facial expression. The prince's attitude, his dismissive comments, his complete lack of respect, it was all captured on camera for the world to see. And through it all, Sam Champion had remained calm, professional, and dignified. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't insulted the prince back. He had simply drawn a line and enforced it. That's what made him the good guy in this situation. Not because he was perfect, but because he knew when to stand up for himself and his team. The commercial break couldn't come fast enough. As soon as the cameras cut away, the producers rushed over to Sam. "Are you okay?" one of them asked. Sam nodded. "I'm fine. I couldn't let that continue. Not on my watch." "You did the right thing," another producer said firmly. "Nobody should have to put up with that kind of treatment." The conversation in the studio kept circling back to the same question. What had the prince been thinking? He had come onto one of the most watched morning shows in America, been given a platform to discuss his charitable work, and instead had chosen to attack the host who was trying to help him share his message. "He called you a cue card reader," one crew member said, still shocked. "Like that's all you do. Like you haven't been reporting for decades." Sam shrugged. "Some people think a title makes them better than everyone else. They forget that respect is earned, not inherited." That comment would later be quoted in dozens of articles analyzing the incident. It perfectly summed up what had gone wrong. The prince had walked into that studio with an air of superiority, so believing that his royal status entitled him to treat people however he wanted. Sam Champion had reminded him that in America, that's not how things work. As the show came back from commercial, Sam was back in his element. He smiled at the camera, introduced the next segment, and carried on as if nothing had happened. That's what professionals do. They don't let one difficult moment derail an entire broadcast. But behind the scenes, phones were ringing nonstop. The network's public relations team was scrambling to prepare statements. Social media was exploding with reactions. Some people couldn't believe that a host had kicked off a member of the royal family. Others were applauding Sam for standing his ground. The debate would rage for days, but the footage told the story clearly. Anyone who watched the interview could see exactly what happened. They could see the prince's dismissive attitude from the very beginning. And they could see his insulting comments getting progressively worse. They could see Sam's patience wearing thin until he finally had to take action. "Do you know who you're talking to?" the prince had asked, as if his identity should have granted him immunity from basic decency. "You're a guest on Good Morning America," Sam had replied. Simple, direct, true. That exchange became the defining moment of the entire incident. It showed the fundamental difference between the two men. One believed his status put him above criticism. The other understood that everyone, regardless of title, should be held to the same standards of behavior. The show wrapped up without any further drama. Sam thanked the viewers for watching, reminded them to tune in tomorrow, and signed off with his usual warmth. As the cameras stopped rolling and the studio lights dimmed, he finally allowed himself to relax. "That was intense," one of the younger producers said as they gathered their equipment. "It was necessary," Sam corrected gently. "Sometimes you have to stand up for yourself and your principles, even when it's uncomfortable." The team nodded in agreement. They had all witnessed something extraordinary. Their colleague, their friend, had been put in an impossible position and had handled it with grace and strength. He hadn't lost his temper. He hadn't stooped to the prince's level. He had simply enforced a boundary that should never have needed enforcing in the first place. Walking through the hallways after the show, Sam could feel the support from everyone he passed. Crew members gave him thumbs up. Other hosts stopped to shake his hand. Everyone seemed to understand that what he'd done wasn't just about defending himself. It was about defending the integrity of the show and the dignity of everyone who worked there. The prince, meanwhile, had left the building in a fury. His handlers were trying to do damage control, but the situation was already out of their hands. The interview had been broadcast live. There was no taking back what had been said, no erasing what had happened. What made the situation even more remarkable was how predictable it should have been. This wasn't the first time the prince had shown an entitled attitude. There had been other interviews, other public appearances where hints of this behavior had surfaced. But this was the first time someone had called him out so directly, and so publicly. Sam Champion had done what many people probably wished they could do when faced with unreasonable behavior from someone in a position of power. He had said no. He had drawn a line. He had refused to be treated poorly just because someone had a famous name. As the day wore on and the story spread across news outlets and social media platforms, the consensus was clear. Sam had handled the situation perfectly. He had given the prince multiple chances to course correct. He had remained professional, even in the face of insults. And when it became clear that the interview couldn't continue productively, he had made the difficult decision to end it. That evening, Sam sat in his dressing room, reading through some of the reactions online. Most were supportive. People appreciated that he hadn't let himself be walked over. They respected that he had stood up for himself and his team. A few criticized him for not showing more deference to royalty, but those voices were drowned out by the overwhelming support. One tweet caught his attention. Sam Champion just reminded us all that respect is a two-way street. Title means nothing if you can't treat people with basic human decency. He smiled. That was exactly right. That was the lesson in all of this. You can have all the prestige in the world, all the titles and accolades, but if you don't treat people with respect, none of it matters. The prince had come onto Good Morning America expecting to be treated like royalty. And in a way, he had been, right up until the moment he forgot that being a guest means acting like one. He had wanted a platform to share his message, but instead, he had revealed something far more telling about his character. His comment about Sam reading cue cards would go down as one of the most tone-deaf insults in television history. It showed a complete lack of understanding about what journalism involves, what broadcasting requires, what it takes to deliver news and weather information to millions of people every single day. Sam Champion didn't just read cue cards. He connected with viewers. He explained complex weather patterns in ways that made sense. He reported from disaster zones. He raised money for charities. He made people smile every morning. That's not something that can be dismissed with a snide comment. Then the 35 seconds it took for the prince to utter that fatal comment had sealed his fate. From that moment on, the interview was doomed. Sam had given him a chance to apologize, to walk it back, to show some humility. Instead, the prince had doubled down, questioned Sam's authority, and made things exponentially worse. "Are you kicking me off the show?" the prince had asked in disbelief. "Yes, I am," Sam had replied without hesitation. Those 3 words, delivered with calm certainty, represented everything that people admired about Sam Champion. He wasn't being vindictive. He wasn't being dramatic. He was simply stating a fact. The interview was over because it had to be over. There was no other option. Looking back at the footage, you could see the exact moment the prince realized he'd made a catastrophic mistake. His face changed when Sam stood up and confirmed that, yes, he was being asked to leave. All the bluster, all the arrogance, it drained away in an instant, replaced by shock and confusion. He had expected Sam to back down. He had expected his status to protect him. He had expected that he could say whatever he wanted without consequences. He had been wrong on all counts. The moment served as a powerful reminder that in the world of broadcasting, respect matters more than titles. Sam Champion had built his reputation over decades through hard work, dedication, and treating people right. The prince had tried to tear that down with a few careless comments, and it had backfired spectacularly. As Sam finally left the studio that day, he felt a sense of peace. He had done the right thing. It hadn't been easy. It hadn't been comfortable, but it had been necessary. And that's what mattered. The story of Prince Harry being kicked off Good Morning America would be told and retold countless times. It would be analyzed by media experts, discussed by royal watchers, and debated by viewers. But the core truth would remain the same. When someone acts entitled and disrespectful, there are consequences, no matter who they are. Sam Champion had stood his ground. He had defended himself, his show, and his team. He had shown that kindness and professionalism have their limits, and when those limits are crossed, action must be taken. In doing so, he had reminded everyone watching that dignity, respect, and basic human decency are not negotiable, and regardless of someone's title or status in the world. The next morning, Good Morning America opened with their regular programming. Sam was back in his seat, smiling at the camera, delivering the weather forecast like nothing unusual had happened. But everyone knew. The entire country knew. The clip had gone viral overnight. Millions of people had watched the confrontation unfold. When Sam finally addressed it on air, he kept it brief and professional. Yesterday, we had a guest who, unfortunately, wasn't able to complete his interview. We always strive for respectful conversations here, and we appreciate all of our viewers who understand why we hold ourselves to that standard. That was it. No gloating, no lengthy explanations, just a simple acknowledgement and a recommitment to the show's values. It was exactly the right tone, and it reinforced why Sam Champion had become such a trusted figure in American media. Behind the scenes, the network had fully supported Sam's decision. The executives had reviewed the footage and agreed that he had handled an impossible situation as well as anyone could. They released a statement backing him completely, making it clear that Good Morning America would not tolerate disrespectful behavior from guests, regardless of their fame or status. The statement was simple, but powerful. We support Sam Champion's decision. Our show is built on respect, both for our guests and for our team. When that respect is absent, we cannot continue. The Prince's team, meanwhile, was scrambling. They tried to spin the story, suggesting that Sam had been overly sensitive, that the Prince's comments had been misunderstood, that the whole thing had been blown out of proportion. But the video didn't lie. Anyone who watched it could see exactly what had transpired. I'm working on things that actually matter, unlike, some of the content that gets pushed on morning television. That had been the Prince's opening salvo, and it had set the tone for everything that followed. It showed a fundamental disrespect for the platform he was using and the people who had invited him. Then came the "you people" comment. Then the insult about reading cue cards. Each statement had been worse than the last, building toward an inevitable confrontation. Sam had tried to steer the conversation back on track multiple times, but the Prince had been determined to be difficult. What stood out most in the aftermath was how unnecessary the whole thing had been. The Prince had been given a gift, primetime exposure on one of America's most popular morning shows. He could have talked about his charity work. He could have shared his vision for making a difference. He could have connected with millions of viewers. Instead, he had chosen to alienate everyone in the room. He had insulted the host, dismissed the show, and demonstrated an attitude of superiority that most Americans found deeply off-putting. In trying to appear above it all, he had instead shown himself to be beneath the basic standards of courtesy. But he hadn't made a wrong move. He had stayed calm. He had given the Prince multiple opportunities to correct course. He had drawn clear boundaries and enforced them when necessary. It was a masterclass in professional conduct under pressure. The Prince had asked, "Do you know who you're talking to?" As if that should have mattered. But Sam's response, "You're a guest on Good Morning America," had cut through all the pretense. It didn't matter who the Prince was in other contexts. In that moment, in that studio, He was a guest who had violated the basic rules of civil discourse. For Sam Champion, life had returned to normal. He continued doing the job he loved, treating guests with respect, and delivering quality content to viewers every morning. The incident hadn't changed who he was. If anything, it had reinforced what people already knew about him, that he was a man of principle. The prince, on the other hand, had learned a valuable lesson. You cannot demand respect while showing none. You cannot expect kindness while being cruel. You cannot insult people and then act surprised when they refuse to continue engaging with you. And Sam Champion, the weatherman who supposedly just read cue cards, why had shown the world what real class looks like. He had demonstrated that you don't need a title to have dignity. You don't need royal blood to command respect. You just need to treat people right and stand firm when others don't. That 35-second moment when the prince made his fatal comment would be replayed forever. But it would always be shown in context, as the catalyst for a confrontation that the prince started and Sam Champion finished, with grace, dignity, and an unwavering commitment to doing what was right.